The morning sun struggled to break through the fog as a city bus hissed to a stop in front of the courthouse. Commuters shuffled off, their coats pulled tight against the chill. Among them was a tall man in a simple gray suit carrying a plain brown folder tucked beneath his arm. There was no entourage, no flashing cameras, no sign of the spectacle that usually followed him wherever he went. Only the quiet crunch of shoes on wet pavement as he stepped down from the bus and into the stillness of the courthouse square. The driver, a man named Frank who'd been running this route for 20 years, caught a glimpse of the passenger in his mirror before closing the doors. He'd noticed him earlier, polite, quiet, offering a small thank you when he paid his fare, something rare in this city. Frank had seen all kinds: impatient executives barking into phones, students lost in headphones, people who treated him like part of the machine. But this man had looked him in the eye. It wasn't just manners. It was calm, grounded, the kind of peace that made you curious. As the bus pulled away, Frank found himself watching in the mirror longer than usual. The man didn't rush toward the marble steps like the others did. Instead, he paused near the edge of the sidewalk, gazing at the courthouse as if it held more weight than just another legal proceeding. The building loomed ahead, columns carved from limestone, its flags fluttering faintly in the wind. Black sedans lined the curb, engines idling, chauffeurs in dark coats waiting for their employers. The man adjusted his tie, checked the folder once, and began to walk. Each step was deliberate, unhurried, the gait of someone used to time bending to his will. But not today. Today, he moved like an ordinary man. Inside the courthouse gates, photographers gathered, murmuring impatiently, expecting a convoy of luxury cars. Security men scanned the street, their radios buzzing with fragments of conversation. No one paid attention to the man approaching on foot. Even the cameras pointed the other way. Frank had turned his bus down the next street when the radio announcer's voice filled the silence. "Breaking news," the host said. "Elon Musk is expected to appear at the federal courthouse this morning for the highly anticipated hearing involving—" Frank's hand froze on the steering wheel. He blinked at the mirror again, though his passenger was long gone. "No way," he muttered under his breath. That quiet man in the gray suit, who'd said thank you and handed over $2 with a nod, that had been him. Back at the courthouse, Elon walked past the rows of luxury cars that gleamed under the soft light, their polished surfaces reflecting the chaos around them. Reporters clustered near the entrance, shouting questions, ready to pounce the moment he arrived. But they didn't see him. Not yet. His unmarked arrival, his simple demeanor, made him invisible in plain sight. He climbed the stone steps, pausing once to watch a group of lawyers rush by, their briefcases clattering, their voices sharp and hurried. He seemed almost out of place, like a man from another world who'd wandered into the wrong scene. But there was something steady in his expression, a quiet acceptance, as if he knew that facing the storm required silence first. When he reached the top of the stairs, the first drops of rain began to fall. The reporters turned, umbrellas opening in a synchronized dance. One of them finally spotted him. Wait, that's him!" In an instant, the quiet broke. Flashes exploded, microphones thrust forward, questions collided mid-air. But for a brief moment, just before the noise swallowed him whole, the bus driver's image flickered in Elon's mind. A simple man doing an honest day's work. A reminder of what Mate read. He adjusted the folder under his arm, straightened his shoulders, and stepped into the courthouse. The echo of his footsteps lost beneath the roar of the world waiting to judge him. The sound of heels on marble echoed through the endless glass corridor of Thorne Enterprises. The morning sun cut through the panoramic windows, catching on polished chrome, on mirrored surfaces, on the steady rhythm of power that pulsed through the building. Every clock ticked in perfect harmony, synchronized to Alex Thorne's obsession, precision. Time to him was control, and control was everything. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Emily Hayes stumbled out, clutching her worn leather bag against her chest. Her hair was still damp from the rain, and her breath came fast as she tried to calm the panic rising in her throat. 7 minutes. She was 7 minutes late. She'd counted every one of them as she stood helplessly in traffic, watching the daycare nurse wave at her through the window, the twins crying because she couldn't leave without making sure they were safe. Now, as she stepped into the wide, immaculate office floor of the 22nd level, the entire space seemed to turn toward her. Assistants paused mid-stride, whispers darting between desks. She felt every eye on her as she rushed toward her station, praying that Alex Thorne, the man they all called the Clock, hadn't noticed her absence. He had. From the corner of the room, behind a wall of glass that separated his office from the mortal world, Alex Thorne watched her enter. His jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to the digital clock on his wall. 8:07. Not 8 o'clock. Not acceptable. He rose from his desk in one sharp, fluid movement, the kind that made even senior executives hold their breath. The door to his office opened silently, but the air itself seemed to change as he stepped out. Miss Hayes. His voice was calm, too calm. It carried through the room like a blade sliding across glass. Emily froze mid-step. "What time is it?" She turned slowly, clutching the strap of her bag. "Iggy?" 8:07, sir." 8:07, he repeated, glancing at his wristwatch as if confirming the crime. "Our start time?" 8 o'clock, she said softly, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound professional. The silence stretched. Dozens of employees pretended to focus on their screens. The hum of computers filled the air like static. "And yet," Alex said, taking a step closer, "you arrived at 8:07. I'm sorry," she whispered. "My daughter's—" "Personal excuses are not professional reasons," he interrupted sharply. "You've been late 3 times this month." Emily's cheeks flushed. "It was never carelessness, sir. My twins were sick this morning. I couldn't—" He lifted a hand, cutting her off. "You couldn't plan better? Anticipate? Take responsibility? You work for Thorne Enterprises, not a charity. Punctuality is the simplest form of respect." Her eyes glistened, and she swallowed the lump in her throat. "Please," she said quietly. "I need this job. I'm trying my best. I wasn't late for myself. I was late because they're sick." The words hung between them like smoke, soft, fragile, devastating. For the first time, Alex's gaze faltered. Something inside him shifted, a flicker of discomfort, almost guilt. But habit was stronger than feeling. He straightened, his voice turning cold again. "You're dismissed," he said flatly. She stared at him, disbelief flooding her face. "Fired?" "Effective immediately. HR will handle your severance." The silence that followed was absolute. Emily's breath trembled as she nodded, blinking back tears. She turned to gather her things, her hands shaking so badly that a stack of files slipped from her grasp and scattered across the floor. No one moved to help. Alex watched her kneel, her shoulders trembling as she gathered the papers one by one. She stood, clutching them to her chest like a shield, and met his eyes one last time. "I hope someday you understand what kindness costs," she whispered. Then she walked away. The elevator doors closed behind her, and for the first time in years, Alex Thorne couldn't focus on the ticking of the clocks. The sound that had always soothed him now felt unbearable, loud, hollow, wrong. He returned to his glass office, but the view outside seemed changed. The city stretched endlessly below, perfect and cold, just as he liked it. But somewhere deep inside him, beneath the armor of discipline and control, something small and unfamiliar stirred. It wasn't regret. Not yet. It was quieter than that. An ache. A question. A feeling he couldn't name. And far below, in the rain-slick streets, Emily Hayes walked away from the building. Her reflection fractured in every glass window, her world collapsing while Alex Thorne's perfect one began, imperceptibly, to crack. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked bruised when Alex Thorne stood in front of the window of his office, staring at the city that stretched endlessly below him. The meeting he was supposed to be in had started 10 minutes ago, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept returning to the moment earlier that morning, the sound of Emily Hayes whispering that one sentence: "I wasn't late for myself. I was late because they're sick." It played over and over in his head like a broken record that refused to fade. He had fired people before, hundreds of them. Maybe more in his world. Mistakes were like cracks in glass, small but dangerous, and he had built his empire by never allowing cracks to spread. But something about her eyes, the way she had tried not to cry, had left a mark. He couldn't explain. It made him uneasy, angry. Even not at her, but at himself. By the time the board meeting ended, Alex was restless. He dismissed everyone and grabbed his coat. He told himself it was just to clear his head, but deep down he knew he was looking for something he couldn't name. He took the elevator down and stepped out into the cold evening air. The streetlights were just flickering on the world below. His glass tower felt foreign and alive in a way he wasn't used to. He didn't know where he was going until he found himself standing across from the narrow street where Thorne Enterprise staff housing began, a quiet place with small garden patches and low fences where some of the lower-level employees lived. He should have turned back, but he didn't. Instead, he saw a familiar figure sitting on a wooden bench in the little garden across the street. Emily. She was sitting with two little girls, identical twins with curls of gold and matching yellow raincoats. Their laughter drifted across the air like music. Emily was holding a small paper bag on her lap, and from it she pulled out 2 cupcakes with tiny candles stuck on top. She lit them carefully, shielding the flames from the faint breeze, then began to sing softly. Her voice was low and sweet, a tune that seemed to melt into the sound of wind and rustling leaves. Alex froze. He recognized the song. It was an old lullaby, one his mother used to hum before the world had taught him that love was a weakness. The girls clapped their small hands and blew out the candles, then threw their arms around their mother's neck, squealing with joy. Alex felt something tighten in his chest. The woman he had fired this morning was sitting there, smiling like someone who hadn't just lost everything. There was no bitterness in her face, only love, only grace. The twins began to dance in a circle, their laughter echoing through the garden. And in that moment, Alex felt the kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. He didn't realize he was smiling until a soft voice behind him spoke. "Mr. Thorne, sir." His assistant Susan stood there breathless, holding a folder. "I've been looking for you," she said. "Your car is waiting." Alex didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the garden, on the woman who had made him feel human again without even knowing it. "Who is she?" Susan asked quietly, following his gaze. "Emily Hayes," Alex replied before. He could stop himself. "She worked for us." "Past tense," Susan said. "You let her go this morning?" Alex turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said, and for the first time, his voice carried something other than command. It carried doubt. He watched as Emily gathered her daughters and led them inside a small apartment. One of the girls looked back, waving at the empty garden. Alex's hand lifted halfway, as if to wave back before he caught himself, and lowered it slowly. "Let's go," he said finally, his tone flat again, but Susan noticed the change in his eyes, something softer, quieter, almost human, as the car drove away. Alex looked out the window, unable to shake the image of the woman singing to her children. The sound of their laughter seemed to follow him, haunting him long after the city lights swallowed them whole. He told himself it didn't matter that she didn't matter yet, deep inside where the walls of logic couldn't reach. Something whispered that maybe she was the first thing that ever had. The next morning, the city woke with its usual rhythm of chaos and ambition. But Alex Thorne was already awake long before dawn, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse. The night had been long, restless, and filled with thoughts he couldn't silence. He kept seeing the image of Emily Hayes sitting under the faint light of the garden, singing to her twins. It had been hours, but the sound of her voice still echoed in his head like a ghost refusing to leave. He told himself it was just guilt, a natural response from firing someone who clearly didn't deserve it. But guilt didn't feel like this. Guilt didn't make you wonder how someone so fragile could look stronger than anyone you knew. Guilt didn't make you question who you were when no one was watching. By 8 o'clock, Alex was already at the office, his movements sharp controlled. He called for Susan, his loyal assistant, who entered with her usual Science-y, carrying a stack of reports. But before she could speak, he said, "Find out where Emily Hayes lives." Susan froze. The request was unexpected and dangerous. She studied his face carefully, trying to understand what he was planning. "Sir," she began cautiously, "if this is about the incident yesterday, it's over. Har processed her termination last night." "I don't care about HR," Alex interrupted. "I want her address." Susan hesitated for a moment, then nodded quietly. She'd worked for Alex long enough to know that when he said something, he meant it, but there was something different in his tone. This time it wasn't command. It was curiosity, mixed with something close to regret. By noon, Alex sat behind his desk staring at the folder Susan placed before him. It contained only a few pages. Her address, employment history, salary details. Everything looked ordinary, painfully ordinary. But what caught his eye was a note scribbled at the bottom of one form. "Emergency Contact Daycare Center, Uptown, West Maple Avenue." He closed the file, stood abruptly, and grabbed his coat. His driver raised an eyebrow when Alex gave the new destination, but said nothing. The car cut through traffic swiftly until they reached the modest neighborhood lined with old brick buildings and small gardens where children's laughter filled the air. Alex told the driver to wait and stepped out alone. The daycare was painted in cheerful colors, the kind that tried to hide the exhaustion of the people who worked there. Alex stood outside for a moment, watching through the glass window. Emily was there volunteering her time even though she no longer had a job. She knelt beside a group of toddlers, helping them draw with crayons, her hair tied loosely, her clothes simple but clean, and her eyes filled with a warmth he couldn't understand. She laughed at something one of the children said, and Alex felt a strange pull deep inside his chest. He could have right then gone back to his empire of order and control. But instead, he walked to a nearby cafe across the street, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window watching her. He told himself he was only making sure she was all right. Nothing more, but the lie tasted bitter because deep down he knew the truth. He wanted to see her again, not as an employee, not as someone he'd fired, but as the woman who'd made him feel something real in a world built on pretense. Hours passed before he returned to his tower, but the decision had already formed in his mind. That evening, he called Susan again. "Prepare a delivery," he said quietly. "What kind of delivery?" she asked. "Groceries, toys for children, something simple. Make it look anonymous. I want no name attached." "Understood, sir." That night, as rain began to fall again, Emily returned home with her twins, tired but smiling when she opened the door. 2 boxes sat waiting, filled with food, fruit, cereal, and medicine. Her daughters gasped in surprise. "Mama, look, Angel's brought us gifts." Emily blinked, fighting tears. She looked around the empty hallway, but no one was there. She whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular, believing it to be a small miracle. From the shadows across the street, a car engine started. Alex watched the light from her apartment spill onto the wet pavement. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there listening to the rain, his heart steady but his thoughts spinning, because for the first time in years, Alex Thorne had done something kind, and it terrified him. The storm began without warning. That night, the wind howled through the streets like an angry spirit, and the rain came down in sheets, soaking everything in seconds. The city lights blurred behind the downpour, turning into rivers of color. Alex Thorne sat in the back of his car, his phone buzzing with constant notifications, but he ignored them. He had spent the entire week trying to drown out the image of Emily Hayes and her children. But the harder he tried to bury the thought, the louder it became in his mind. He had promised himself that what he did for her would end with the groceries. But it hadn't every day since he had made sure new boxes appeared outside her door, each one delivered through different hands, so she would never know they came from him. He told himself it was guilt management, but the truth was darker and softer than guilt. It was fascination, maybe even longing. Now, as thunder cracked across the sky, he noticed a flicker of movement outside through the rain-blurred window. he saw the familiar little garden near the building where she lived. A small figure stood there, hunched against the storm. Alex leaned forward. Heart pounding, he recognized her instantly. Emily! She was struggling with an umbrella, trying to guide her daughters toward shelter. The wind ripped the umbrella from her grasp, sending it spinning down the street. The twins screamed and clung to her legs as she tried to calm them, without thinking. Alex opened the car door and ran into the rain. The cold hit him like a shock, but adrenaline kept him moving. He crossed the street in seconds, the storm drenching his expensive suit completely. He reached her just as she stumbled, trying to carry both girls at once. Here, he said. Take my coat. Emily looked up, startled, her hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Thorne, she breathed, her voice shaking. I can handle it. You shouldn't be here. Alex ignored the protest. He bent down, scooping one of the twins into his arms. She was crying softly, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The other clung to Emily's skirt. Alex shouted over the wind, "Where's your building?" Emily pointed toward the end of the street, and together they ran, fighting the rain that seemed determined to push them back. Every step felt endless, but finally they reached the small apartment building, drenched and breathless. Alex followed her up the narrow stairwell, his shoes leaving trails of water behind. Inside the apartment, the twins rushed to their small couch, laughing now that the danger was gone. They wrapped themselves in blankets. Emily closed the door, leaning against it for a moment before whispering, "I don't understand. Why are you here?" Alex hesitated, his breath still uneven. "I was passing by," he said quietly. "I saw you struggling." She stared at him, suspicion and confusion mixing in her eyes. "Passing by at this hour." "In this weather," she said softly. "You expect me to believe that?" Her voice was calm, but the hurt beneath it was sharp. She looked at him for a long time before glancing toward her daughters, who were now giggling together, oblivious to the storm outside. "Thank you," she said finally, her tone heavy but sincere, for helping them. Alex nodded, unable to speak. He felt like a stranger in his own skin, standing in this tiny, warm apartment filled with drawings and toys and the scent of fresh bread. It was the opposite of his world of glass and silence. Emily handed him a towel. She smiled faintly despite herself. "You look ridiculous," she said, and for the first time Alex laughed. It was a small laugh, awkward and real. He hadn't done that in years. They sat in silence, listening to the rain ease into a softer rhythm. The twins fell asleep on the couch, their hands intertwined. Emily whispered, "I'll never forget what happened today." Alex watched her tuck a strand of wet hair behind her ear. Something in her tenderness disarmed him completely. He realized then that the empire he had built meant nothing compared to the warmth of this small room. The world he ruled with fear and efficiency felt empty next to the laughter of two sleeping children. As he stood to leave, she followed him to the door. He turned back, hesitating, as if wanting to say something, but instead simply said, "Stay safe," and walked into the night. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but his heart was racing because he knew something had changed forever. He had crossed a line between power and feeling, between guilt and love, and once crossed, there would be no going back. The morning light spilled through Alex Thorne's office, but he didn't notice it. His mind was still trapped in the memory of last night, the sound of Emily's laughter mixed with the storm, the warmth of her small apartment, and the way her daughters had looked at him like he was someone safe, not a ruthless man who ruled by fear. He had tried to forget it, but the image haunted him like a heartbeat he couldn't silence. Susan entered quietly, placing a file on his desk. She hesitated, studying her boss, who sat staring at nothing, his tie undone. "His coffee untouched, sir," she said carefully. "You have the investor meeting in 10 minutes. Alex didn't look up. "Cancel it," he said, his voice low but firm. Susan blinked. "Cancel, sir." "They flew in from London," I said. "Cancel it," he repeated, this time with finality. Susan nodded quietly and left, knowing something in him had shifted, and whatever it wasn't small. Alex stood and walked to the window, watching the city move below like a machine, each person rushing somewhere, chasing time the way he used to. but now it all felt distant, empty. He turned away and picked up his phone without thinking. He scrolled through his contacts, stopping at Emily's number, the one he still had from her employee file. His thumb hovered over the call button, but he didn't press it. Instead, he grabbed his coat and left the building. His driver jumped up from the car seat, startled. "Sir, where to?" Alex's answer was quiet uptown West Maple Avenue. The drive was silent, rain still clinging to the edges of the windows. When they arrived, Alex spotted Emily outside her apartment, standing at the small garden fence. She was talking to another tenant, smiling despite the exhaustion on her face. The twins were playing nearby, their laughter floating through the air. Alex stayed in the car, watching unseen until his chest ached with a feeling he couldn't define. Finally, he stepped out, crossing the street. Emily turned when she heard his footsteps, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mr. Thorne?" she said cautiously. "What are you doing here?" Alex stopped a few feet away. "I wanted to check if you and the girls were all right." Her expression softened slightly, but she didn't step closer. "We're fine," she said. "Thank you for last night. You didn't have to help, but I'm grateful." Alex hesitated before speaking. "You don't owe me gratitude, Emily. You deserve kindness." She blinked, taken aback by the words coming from a man who had once humiliated her in front of an entire office. Before she could respond, the twins came running, one holding a wilted flower they'd picked from the garden. "This is for you," the little girl said shyly, offering it to him. Alex crouched down, accepting it with a small smile. "Thank you, it's beautiful," he said. The child giggled and ran back to her sister. Emily watched the scene quietly, something fragile stirring inside her, but she caught herself, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. "I should get them inside," she said softly. "They have lunch soon." As she turned away, Alex spoke again. "Emily, I was wrong to fire you." The words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. She froze, her back still turned to him. "You don't have to say that," she whispered, but her voice trembled. "Yes, I do," Alex replied. "I was cruel that morning. I didn't even ask why you were late. I just wanted control, and control doesn't build people, it breaks them. I broke you. And I'm sorry." Emily turned slowly, her eyes bright with tears. She searched his face, trying to see if this was another act, another show of power, but what she found instead was truth, raw and human. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "I never expected to hear that from you." Alex took a slow breath. "I know you don't trust me, but if you ever need anything at all, call this." He handed her a small card with his private number. She stared at it for a moment before nodding. He walked back toward the car, but before getting in, he looked once more at the garden the twins were waving from the window, their smiles bright against the glass, and for the first time in years, Alex smiled back. It wasn't the sharp, confident smile of a man used to winning. It was small, uncertain and real. As the car drove away, Susan's voice came through the phone in his hand. "Sir, the London investors are furious." Alex's eyes stayed fixed on the fading image of Emily's apartment. "Let them be," he said quietly. "I just realized some things are worth more than profit." What he didn't notice was the shadow of a man standing at the corner watching the scene unfold. The stranger lit a cigarette, his gaze cold and calculating as he muttered under his breath, "So this is the man who replaced me." The smoke curled into the gray sky and disappeared, leaving only the faint echo of danger creeping closer to the fragile peace. Alex and Emily had just begun to build. The night had a strange stillness to it, the kind that came before a storm. Even though the weather was calm, the air felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. Alex Thorne sat alone in his study, the city lights flickering across the glass walls, his mind restless. He had spent the last few weeks quietly helping Emily and her daughters from a distance, sending small opportunities through people he trusted, never signing his name. But lately the distance had started to feel unbearable. He wanted to see her again, not as a savior, but as a man who had finally learned what it meant to care. Meanwhile, across town, Emily was sitting at her kitchen table sorting through bills. Her daughters asleep in the next room, The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the faint rhythm of rain against the window. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Alex. She didn't want to admit it, but something about him had changed. The cold arrogance she remembered was gone, replaced by something softer, something that scared her even more because it felt real. She stood to pour herself a cup of tea when a sharp knock echoed through the hallway. Her body tensed. It was late, too late for visitors. She hesitated before opening the door, only to find an envelope on the floor. No sender, no markings, just her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. She tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of her and the twins taken that afternoon in the park. From a distance, her heart stopped beneath it. A note written in rushed, uneven letters. "Stay away from Thorn or you'll regret it." Her hands shook. The photograph slipped to the floor. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Fear crawled up her spine. She locked the door and double-checked the windows, then reached for her phone. She didn't even realize she had dialed Alex's number until his voice came through low and steady. "Emily, is everything all right?" She could barely speak. Someone was watching us. "Alex, I got a picture of me and the girls with a note." He heard the tremor in her voice. "Where are you right now? At home? Stay there, I'm coming." 20 minutes later, headlights flashed across her window and a knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, Alex stood there, rain dripping from his coat, eyes burning with worry. He stepped inside, scanning the room for any sign of intrusion. "Show me the note." She handed it to him and watched his jaw tighten. "This isn't random," he said quietly. "Someone's trying to scare you." "Who would do this?" she whispered, clutching her arms as if to hold herself together. Alex hesitated before answering. "Your husband," he said finally. Emily froze. "Mark," she breathed. "I haven't heard from him in months. He's gone." "No," Alex said, his voice low. "He's back." He told her about the private investigator who had mentioned seeing Mark near her old workplace, about the debts he still owed, and the people looking for him. Emily sank into a chair, trembling. The man who had abandoned her might now be following her again, using her and the children as leverage. She looked up at Alex, fear clouding her eyes. "What if he comes here?" Alex took a step closer, his voice soft but firm. "He won't touch you, I promise." He spent the next hour checking every lock, every window, while she sat quietly watching the storm begin. Outside, thunder rolled across the city and flashes of lightning painted the walls in ghostly light. The twins stirred in their sleep, whimpering from the noise. Alex knelt beside them, smoothing their hair until they settled back down when he looked up. Emily was standing there, tears in her eyes. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "I couldn't stay away knowing you were scared." Their eyes met, and something in the air changed. The storm outside roared, but inside the room there was only silence and the pounding of their hearts. Alex reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered for a second too long. Emily felt the world tilt slightly, like something fragile had shifted between them. But before either could speak, another knock came at the door. Sharp, urgent, both of them froze. Alex motioned for her to stay back. He opened the door carefully, revealing Susan standing in the hallway, pale and shaken. "Sir," she whispered, "we have a problem." She handed him a file. Inside were surveillance photos showing Mark meeting with two men known for blackmail and extortion. Alex's expression hardened. "This isn't just about money anymore," he said grimly. "He's planning something bigger." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "What does he want?" Alex looked at her, the truth in his eyes, both dark and protective. "He wants you, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he thinks he's owed. But this time, I'll be ready for him." Emily took a step closer, her fear melting into defiance. "Then we'll face him together," she said softly, and Alex knew at that moment that the fight ahead would test everything he had built, everything he had become. But he also knew one thing for certain: he would protect her and those girls, even if it cost him everything. The next morning began with an uneasy silence that stretched over the city like a full deep breath. Alex had barely slept, his mind replaying the events of the night before: the photograph, the threat, the fear in Emily's eyes. It all felt too calculated, too personal. He stood by the window of his penthouse, the skyline glowing gold with sunrise, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. The man who once believed emotions were distractions was now willing to burn his empire to keep one woman and her daughters safe. Down in the apartment across town, Emily was making breakfast. Her movements automatic, but her thoughts miles away. Every creak in the hallway made her heart jump. Every shadow in the window looked like something watching. She tried to keep her voice cheerful for the twins who giggled over pancakes, but even they could sense her tension. "Mama, why are you sad?" Lily asked softly. Emily smiled, forcing calm. "I'm not sad, sweetheart, just thinking too much." Sophie frowned. "Are we in trouble?" Emily crouched beside them, pulling both girls into her arms. "Never," she whispered. "You'll always be safe with me." As the morning light shifted, a knock came at the door and Emily froze. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Alex holding a bag of groceries and a cautious smile. He stepped inside his presence, filling the small space with quiet authority. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "If Mark is watching." Alex closed the door behind him. "Then we give him something to watch," he said calmly. Confusion flickered across her face. "What are you talking about?" Alex pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "Evidence," he said. "Every transaction, every illegal debt, every threat your husband has made over the past 2 years. I had my team dig deeper. He's not just running from creditors. Emily, he's working for someone else." Her breath caught someone else. "What do you mean?" Alex paced slowly, his voice low. "There's a man named Victor Hale. He controls a network of fake charities and laundering fronts. He's been using people like Mark to move stolen funds through legitimate businesses, including Thorn Enterprises, without realizing it. Mark became part of his chain when he disappeared. He wasn't just hiding. He was being used." Emily's knees felt weak. She leaned against the counter. "What does this have to do with me?" Alex turned to her, his eyes dark. "It means that whoever sent that picture wasn't just trying to scare you. They were warning you to stay quiet because you know something that could expose them." Before she could respond, the lights flickered once, twice, and went out, plunging the apartment into shadows. The twins squealed from the living room. Alex's instincts kicked in. He moved quickly, pulling out his phone. The power outage was too sudden, too perfect to be coincidence. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the door. Emily's voice trembled. "Alex, wait, don't go alone." But he was already halfway down the hall when he heard footsteps echoing up the stairwell. Slow, deliberate, he pressed himself against the wall, listening. Then the sound stopped. A whisper followed, faint and mocking. "Nice to see you again, Mr. Thorne." The voice was unmistakable. "Mark." Alex stepped out into the hall, his pulse pounding. Mark stood a few feet away, soaked from rain, a twisted smile on his face. "You've been busy," he sneered, "playing the hero for my family." Alex's jaw tightened. "You lost the right to call them your family the day you walked out." Mark laughed harshly. "Oh, but I didn't walk out. I was forced out. You have no idea what you've stepped into." Alexei was never the threat you should have feared. Before Alex could respond, Mark reached into his coat, pulling out a gun. Alex reacted instantly, tackling him. The weapon clattered across the floor. They fought violently, crashing into the wall. Emily screamed from inside. Alex grabbed Mark's wrist, forcing him down, but Mark managed to land a hit that split Alex's lip. The struggle ended when a door at the far end opened and 2 men stepped out. Dark suits, cold eyes. Alex recognized them immediately. Hale's men, Everything moved fast. Alex grabbed the gun first, aiming it between them. "Get out of this building now." One of the men smirked. "You don't understand, Thorne. This isn't your fight." Alex's voice turned deadly. "It became my fight the moment you threatened her." They hesitated just long enough for sirens to echo in the distance. Emily had called the police. The men vanished down the stairs, dragging Mark with them before the officers arrived, leaving nothing but chaos and blood in their wake. Emily rushed to Alex, her hands shaking. "You're bleeding," she whispered. Alex took her face in his hands. I'm fine, he said quietly, but his voice trembled. They're coming after you now, and I won't let them win. Emily looked at him through her tears. What do we do next? He looked toward the window where red and blue lights flickered against the glass. We stop running. We expose them all. But first we disappear until I can make sure you and the girls are safe. That night, as they left the city behind, driving toward a cabin hidden deep in the woods, Emily held the twins close while Alex drove in silence. The rain began again, falling softly against the windshield. The storm was coming, but this time Alex wasn't afraid. For the first time, he had something worth fighting for, something worth protecting, even if it meant destroying everything he'd built to keep it. The cabin stood hidden among the trees, the air heavy with mist and silence. Alex had chosen this place because no one could find it, not even his closest business allies. But as he stepped inside that night, something felt wrong. The world outside was too still. No birds, no wind, no sound. He looked around the small wooden room where Emily was tucking the twins into bed, her soft voice humming the same lullaby he had once heard in the garden. It was a fragile moment of peace, but his instincts told him it wouldn't last. He checked every lock, every window, then returned to the front door, listening to the night. The faint crackle of static came through his phone, a security alert from his team in the city. He opened it and froze. The message was simple. We lost them. They found your car. Alex's blood ran cold. He turned to Emily. Pack what you can. We have to move. She looked up, startled. Why? What happened? They know we're here, he said, and before the words had even left his mouth, the faint crunch of footsteps came from outside. Emily's eyes widened. Alex motioned for her to stay quiet. He reached for the gun he'd taken from Mark days earlier and moved toward the window. Two shadows passed through the clearing. One tall, one smaller, both armed. His heart pounded as he whispered to Emily, "Take the girls to the basement." Now she obeyed without argument, carrying the twins down the narrow wooden steps. Alex stayed by the door, counting the seconds between each footstep. The silence stretched until it broke with the sound of splintering wood. The door burst open. Two men rushed in, guns raised. Alex fired once, hitting one in the shoulder. The other lunged forward, knocking the weapon from his hand. They crashed into the wall. The fight brutal, fast. Alex used everything he had learned from years of survival in boardrooms where words were weapons. But this was different. This was life or death. He slammed the attacker into the corner, disarming him and striking until the man went still. From the basement came a faint cry. One of the twins. Alex's heart lurched. He ran down the stairs and found Emily crouched beside them, trembling but safe. He knelt beside her. We have to leave now. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. We can't keep running, Alex. They'll never stop unless you end this. He met her gaze, her fear mixing with determination. She was right. The empire he'd built, the power he'd once worshipped, had drawn monsters toward them. The only way to end it was to face them directly. He handed her the car keys. There's a back road down the hill. Follow it until you reach the main highway. I'll draw them away. Emily grabbed it. Did his arm. No, I'm not leaving you. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice quiet but firm. You have to for them. He looked toward the twins huddled close, their small faces filled with confusion and fear. Tell them I'll find them no matter what. Before she could stop him, he was already moving back up the stairs. His footsteps steady despite the chaos. The surviving intruder was gone, but Alex could hear an engine in the distance, headlights cutting through the trees. He stepped out into the rain, the cold slicing against his skin, and raised his weapon. A black SUV appeared at the edge of the clearing. Its doors opened, and Victor Hale stepped out, calm and smiling, like a man who already believed he had won. You're a hard man to find, Hale said, lighting a cigarette. You should have stayed out of this. Alex Thorne. Alex's voice was ice. You made it personal when you threatened her. Hale exhaled smoke. You ruined everything when you tried to play hero. Your empire, your money, even your name. None of it will save you now. Alex took a slow step forward. Maybe not, but it will destroy you. They stood in the rain, the forest crackling with tension. Then both men moved at once. Shots echoed through the trees, the sound sharp and final. When the smoke cleared, Hale was on the ground, the gun slipping from his hand. Alex staggered backward, clutching his side, the pain searing through him. He fell to one knee, but refused to collapse. He looked toward the dark road where Emily's car lights disappeared through the mist and managed a weak smile. Hours later, as dawn broke, Emily returned with the police. Her heart pounding with dread, she ran through the clearing, calling his name, and found him lying beneath the oak tree, his body cold but his face peaceful. She fell beside him, sobbing. The twins stood behind her, silent, holding each other tight. A soft breeze swept through the forest, carrying the faint scent of lilies and rain. Emily lifted his hand to her heart, whispering through her tears, "You kept your promise. You found us even at the end, Shikia." Loosed her eyes as the first rays of sunlight touched his face, and somewhere in that quiet morning the storm finally broke, leaving only love behind, stronger than fear, stronger than time. The rain had stopped, but the world still smelled of sorrow and smoke. 3 days had passed since that night in the forest. The papers called it a tragedy. The fall of a billionaire who died saving a family he wasn't born into but loved more than life itself. Emily had not spoken to anyone since that night. She moved through the house like a ghost, holding the twins close whenever the memories became too heavy. She told them stories about their hero, about the man who had taught them how to dance in the rain and find light in dark places. The funeral was small. No cameras, no reporters, just people who had seen Alex Thorne not as a name, but as a man. His employees spoke of how he changed their lives. His board members spoke of his brilliance, but Emily said nothing. She stood under the gray sky, clutching the hands of her daughters, as the rain began again, soft and cold against her face. The twins placed white lilies on his grave, their small fingers trembling. Then Emily whispered goodbye. Her voice carried away by the wind. Weeks turned into months. The pain dulled, but never disappeared. Emily returned to work at the nonprofit she had once been offered, this time on her own terms. She built programs for single mothers and children in need. Her name slowly became known, not as the woman he saved, but as the woman who carried his dream forward. The twins grew stronger, their laughter filling the small home with life again. But every night before bed they would look out the window and whisper, "Good night, Daddy Alex," believing that somewhere beyond the stars he could still hear them. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Emily was working in the garden, the same one where he had once watched her sing. She was planting roses, and she noticed a delivery truck stop by the gate. A man handed her a sealed envelope. No return address, just her name written in Alex's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter and a small silver key. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, then I am gone, but I could not leave without giving you the truth. Not the kind of truth that hurts, but the kind that heals beneath the oak tree where we danced in the rain. You will find a box buried deep within the roots. It holds everything I once was, and everything I wanted to become for you and the girls. Use it to build your future, the way you taught me to build hope with love, not power." Tears blurred her vision as she followed his instructions. Behind the old oak, she found the box, small and weathered. Inside were documents, ownership papers transferring all of Thorne Enterprises and its charitable branches to her name, the final act of a man who had learned that the greatest power was giving everything away. There was also a small velvet pouch inside it, a golden locket with tiny pictures of Lily and Sophie, and a note that said, "This is my real empire." Months later, Thorne Foundation opened its first shelter for women and children called Alex House, a place filled with laughter, music, and the smell of flowers. Emily worked there every day. The twins played in the garden where the sign stood, "The woman who whispered to flowers," and "The man who learned to listen," one morning as sunlight streamed through the windows. Emily felt a warm breeze move across her face, and for a brief moment she could swear she heard his voice whisper, "Keep dancing." That night, as the twins fell asleep, Emily sat by their beds watching them breathe. She smiled through her tears, knowing that love never really ended. It only changed form. It became rain that washed away pain, wind that carried laughter, and stars that guided the lost home. She walked to the window, looking up at the night sky, the city lights glowing below, and whispered softly, "Thank you, Alex, for finding us, for saving us, for teaching us how to love." In that quiet moment, the clouds parted and a single star shone brighter than all the others. Emily placed her hand over her heart and smiled. It was his way of saying, "I never left," and somewhere beyond the light, beyond time and pain, Alex Thorne smiled too. His soul finally at peace, because the woman who whispered to flowers had taught the world that love, even when broken, could still bloom again forever.